Hello again, my name is Christopher Ames, and this is part 2 of talking about amps with Making Music Magazine. And we're back in the vault again to talk about more of a high gain. Last time we talked about clean tones, this time we're going to talk about high gain and into distortion. So it's a funny thing. Well, last time I was talking about the clean tone and trying to color that tone using some pedals, and there's a lot of pedals out there that tell you, oh, we're a Marshall in a box, or this is real high gain, or this is classic, this is all types of different sounds, and they're all mimicking what an amp can do, or what certain kinds of high gain amps can do when you simply saturate them or overdrive them. Because essentially what you're doing is you're breaking the rules. You're taking an amp and you're overloading it beyond what it's supposed to do, and that's what turns into this amazing creamy distortion that so much great music is built on. So, in fact, even the earliest distortions were actually speakers that had pencils popped through them, cause a hole, cause some sort of buzz, some kind of vibration that it wasn't supposed to do, and that's where we get so many great tones now that we're doing in that place of that. So we're talking about high gain amps today. Now you can obviously get clean tones out of that, but the beauty of a high gain amp is that you can saturate it and that you can overdrive it into that realm of dirt and grit. And again, using, depending on what guitar you're running through it, depending on your fingers, how you are playing, that can accentuate notes, that can thicken them up, all that kind of thing. So we're going to look at a couple of different high gain. I've got a couple amps we want to look at today. I've got one from a company called Orange, and one from probably a pretty standard, the one that sets the bar. We've got a Marshall, because Marshall was another English company, and again, we're the first company that was continually making amps to try to meet the needs of some of the biggest bands at the time. More power, more volume, more gain, more saturation. So we'll be looking at those today. So first we're going to be playing through an Orange Crush Pro. So I just wanted to kind of show you how the gain thing works. So again, this time I'm playing a Heritage LH150. And this time I'm playing it on the bridge pickup, so it's a little bit more thin sounding, a little more bitey sounding, because of the location of the pickup on the body of the guitar. But right now, so this, you can hear it, it's still clean at this point, because the way you essentially saturate an amp, the way you overdrive it, there's two controls. There's one called gain and one called volume. Gain is sort of the volume coming in, volume is the volume on the back end. So if I turn my main volume down, but my gain up, it's like drinking out of a fire hose. Puts too much at the front end, which causes all the overdrive, all the distortion. And then you can bring your volume up to taste, so to speak. So if you did that same kind of lick on a clean sound, it would sound like this. Not quite as exciting as so when you have a saturated signal, you get, not only do you get that dirt and that grit, but you also get notes that just seem to last and last and last. So I can play one note. You do that on a clean tone, and it's kind of boring and it disappears real quickly. So it's amazing to me. A little bit of saturation goes a long way in making guitar way more fun to play. Plus the fact that a little saturation, a little distortion can cover a multitude of sins, so to speak. If my playing might not be real pristine, you dirty it up and it doesn't matter, it's just fun to do that, and you can use those saturated tones in a variety of ways. Obviously, you can do it with chords like, or you can do it in like single note riffs. Or you can do it playing higher up the neck to get your solo notes. You can do all those same things with a clean tone, but somehow it's not quite we've become accustomed to that type of playing being dirtier and grittier and more saturated. So the orange gives you a certain type of saturation. This one, and obviously you can take it louder, you can annoy your neighbors, but you can also, the beauty of an amp like this one is I can get some of that saturated tone at lower volumes. So I can bring that down and I can play it louder. Some of the older tube amps, you didn't get that saturation until you would really cranked it. So that could create some issues for apartment dwellers, things like that. But that's some saturation on an Orange Crush Pro. So now we're going to play through same guitar, the Heritage, through a Marshall DSL 40. So this is a 40-watt tube amp. You get into, as you could tell, I don't know if you could see on the Orange, it had fewer knobs than this one. This got a whole bunch of knobs in the front. You get into this amp and you've got your classic gain and then your ultra gain. So you can get sort of normal saturation or really, really extra saturated. Marshall has been at the forefront of high gain amps since their inception in the 60s. Players like Pete Townsend and Jimi Hendrix and Eric Clapton and the like were Jim Marshall was a local music store owner, I believe, in the area of England. And so they would come in, they're like, we want more, we want louder, we want bigger. There's even a bit of I'm not sure if it's a true story or not, but where Pete Townsend had him build him an 812 cab, which he thought was a great idea until he tried to move it. And then they cut it in half, which is how we ended up with 412 cabs. So somebody could check that and put it in the comments. I think that's a true story. So, but this Marshall, this particular amp, this DSL 40, like I said, has two channels. So rather than having a clean and a dirty, this has classic gain and ultra gain. So this amp is nothing but saturated all the time. So I'm going to start in the classic gain channel, which is going to be more in the bent of like a 70s classic rock kind of thing. So right now I'll do a little bit with your gain. The gain's pretty much set almost all the way up. So this is about as crunchy as classic gain's going to get for this one. That was good until the last bit. But so you get into that, and you've got that very much that saturated, kind of thick, chunky. I think of it as a lot of times as that sort of lead rhythm guitar kind of thing. But then obviously it's got more of that kind of bluesy feel, that classic rock feel. Cool thing about a high gain amp like this, so you can set your gain up like this so that you've got that distortion, that saturation. And then as you turn the volume on your guitar down, it cleans up a little bit. So you can still hear a little bit of it, but it's a much cleaner tone. So if you don't want to mess, if you don't have pedals and stuff on stage, you can be playing. And then when you want it to get a little bit dirtier, you just bring your volume on your guitar up. Because this is part of what goes into that gain channels, the volume your amp is putting into your, the volume your guitar is putting into your amp, which then goes to that gain, which then goes into the final volume. So now the other thing that this particular Marshall amp has, it doesn't have just classic gain, has also what's called ultra gain, which is like classic gain kind of on steroids here. So. I mean, you don't even have to do anything really to, I don't even have to pick the strings. I can just hammer on and get so much, the tone and the sustain goes on for days. Nigel Tufnell would say. But this, you tend to think, I think about this more like the, let's see if I can remember some of my old, some of more of that Jimi Hendrix kind of thing, that Foxy Lady and Purple Haze, those kinds of things. But that's a far more saturated thing, and you get into kind of the ground where you lose some of that clarity of individual notes, unless you're playing just an individual note like that. But you lose some of that clarity because what you've also got now is that whole vibration and the presence and the saturation and those kinds of things coming into play in the tones that you're making now. So when you're playing chords, even though I'm playing a 6-note chord, you kind of hear 1 or 2 notes really. Can't tell much. That's different. And then, but then, because it's so saturated, everything is bleeding into the next thing, bleeding into the next note. But then you get into, when you get into those individual notes, like runs that you might play. Because you've got all that sustain and all of that, saturation in the volume, you've got all of that. That gives those notes a lot more punch and a lot more presence, and it puts them right there in your face. So, again, difference between classic and then the ultra. Sort of like how much salt you put on your food. A little bit of salt or really, really salty, and that's kind of what's going on with the gain. All right, so amps are just a piece of it. That's just one part of the puzzle. If there's something you'd like us to discuss, if you want to see something else, a video like this talking about some other part of the signal chain, part of the gear, we'd love to do it. So leave ideas in the comments, and we might revisit one.